and welcome to our next episode of Big Data Talks, in which we have conversations with industry experts about the way in which data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence are changing the way we live. My name is Jan-Willem Middelburg, and I will be your host today. I'm the author of the Enterprise Big Data Framework, which is hosting this series of Big Data Talks. You can always watch back the recording of this discussion on YouTube, the Big Data Framework website, and the podcasting platforms on Android and iOS. I am extremely pleased to be joined today by Zakiyya Cassimjee, the Chief Information Officer at Astute, the financial services exchange based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Zakiyya is responsible for projects and operations and has a vast experience in the financial services world. Zakiyya heads up the team that is responsible for the technology that enables the movement and integration of financial data in the financial services industry. And this will, of course, be the topic of our conversation today. Additionally, Zakiyya is passionate about leadership and diversity transformation within the corporate environment, and especially about uplifting women in the technology space. We will definitely be talking about that in more detail during our conversations. Welcome so much, Zakiyya. It's really a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's really a great pleasure to host you on the show today. So I would like, if that's okay with you, to dive right in. And Zakiyya, you are the CIO at Astute, which is a financial services exchange. Can you tell me a little bit more about what financial services exchanges are and what you do there?
Absolutely. So Financial Services Exchange is an electronic information exchange enhancing the movement and integration of data within the financial services industry in South Africa. We integrate into all the life insurers, and we have over 150 integration points. This speaks very much to our strategic objective of creating a single view of the client within the industry.
So do I understand that correctly, that you're integrating data from all of the different sources that are necessary to deliver these financial services?
Absolutely, but specifically within the insurance industry. So everything related to life insurance, investment, medical aid, data, all of that is encompassed within this portfolio.
Wow, that must be quite a bit of data. So I'm assuming that data, and especially big data, is powering your organization's business almost on a day-to-day basis. One of the main questions that I always like to start all of these interviews with is, what is your view on the way that big data is changing the world and the way that organizations operate on a day-to-day basis?
Very much so. So we are a fintech and we do have massive amounts of data. The way we see data is changing and how we're going to use data. So how do we manipulate these data and generate insights for our clients and our customers and the insurance industry? I think big data has changed. It's created new opportunities, new business opportunities. It's given us insight into understanding behavior, customer and consumer behavior. It's also created new careers, right, and new opportunities. Previously, we didn't have data scientists, data engineers, data analysts. Data was a small component of the SDLC and IT solution. However, now we have companies that just generate analytics and insights and the meaningfulness that comes out of this, right? And then obviously the different kinds of data that we get from this. And then the other one is looking into health data and how, the trackers that we're generating healthy behaviors, driving healthy behaviors and incentives. And then I think also from a security perspective, to be able to be predictive in this world. As much as we have the data, there's also the security around it. And, given the country laws, given who sees what data, given the democratization of data, how we store the data. There's so many rules around having this, not just having the data, but what do you do with it? How do you keep it? How long do you keep it? GDPR in South Africa, we have POPI that's come into play. All of these things all factor into this. Yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned two main things that I would like to expand upon a little bit more around, which I always personally also find very, very interesting, especially if you talk about concepts like security, but also especially within the insurance industry on how you are using things like health data on a day-to-day basis. So in the solutions that your organization is providing and developing, do you already see these kind of ethical questions coming into place on how do you deal with different countries, different health data records that are available? And if so, how do you deal with that on a more day-to-day basis, given that there's so much different perspectives on this?
That's an interesting question. So we operate within the provisions of the South African legislation, right? However, because we're using international software and cloud hosting solutions, it's then where is the data stored? And more these, as we engage with our integrated partners, the compliance and privacy officers are starting to say, where's your data stored? What is the backup? Who will have access to the data? What are the privacy laws around this? And then you say XYZ technology is in the cloud. Yes, but what is the backup plan? What is the security around that data? Because data breaches are common. And that's why it's so important to have security top of mind in everything that we do. But it's becoming more and more now common to ask these questions. So around the ethics, what do you do? Who's going to use the data? What are you going to use it for? Who's going to see it, So anonymizing the data then comes into play. As you build these capabilities and analytics, you have to anonymize the data in a structured way to make meaningful decisions.
Yeah, so, and then if you think about that from the way that you structure that within your own company, you have all of that, you say it needs to be top of mind, which I fully agree, but in a large company, how do you make that happen? Because there's so many things going on a day-to-day basis. How do you make sure that in a larger company, just like yourself, that data-driven decision-making, but also more of the security aspects and the day-to-day aspects that are coming into play with this, you lead an organization like this on a daily basis. How do you ensure that this can be done? And for our listeners and viewers that are looking at this right now, do you have any tips to take into consideration when it comes towards these issues?
So very much starting with zero trust security, right? So who has access to the data firstly? Because internal threats are also in one of the biggest facing threats that we have. So who has access to what data? How much access do you give? Is it just in time access, etc.? And then around storing the data also, how often is it accessed? And then having those insights to be able to see what's going on with the data. I think starting with data-driven decision-making is around transparency and using the facts and metrics to make business decisions. So what are the business goals? What are your strategic objectives? And what do you want to do with the data? So what is the use case? So we could say, we want to be a data company and we want to sell all the data, etc. But what do you actually want to do with the data? So I think within each division, like for instance, finance, what is the use case for your data to make data-driven decision-making? So how often do we pay people? What are our biggest claims look like? What does what does our most expensive claim look like? Or if you take it to the product space, how are products doing? And then there's internal and then there's external also. So using it internally to make decisions, strategic decisions, but using it externally also for our customers' insights, right? So I think starting small is important. We could go big bang approach, pay a consultancy a large amount of money and go big bang. But I think starting small is what do you want to do with the data? What is it that you want to achieve with it? And that use case is very important to understand because everyone's need is different. Yes, we're a data company, but my need is different from HR's need, which is different from a product owner's need, right? So I think it's to then also have the data centralized as the start. Start with centralizing the data, understanding your data sources, your ingestion points, etc. What kind of data do we have, structured, unstructured? Whose data do we have? What are the rules around the data? And then establishing the right infrastructure, so having the warehouse set up, the data lakes, the CDCs and the extraction layers. So the technology is irrespective, but the infrastructure is important, right? Whichever one you use. Then having a vision, so driving that critical thinking process from the top. So again, what is the use case? And what do we want to do with the data? And then I think embracing the process, because and changing the culture. It's not an overnight process that we're going from today tomorrow we're data-driven decision making. We've enabled it. It's a process and a journey. So getting into the data thinking, and also what are we going to do with it, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a process.
Yeah, I like what you're saying, especially as a part of a journey, and the fact that this is a process that we're embarking upon as a larger organization. So you mentioned all of these different parts that you would need to take into consideration, and I'm pretty certain that a lot of other companies are struggling with the same ways of how do I manage all of that. Are you using any kind of systems or any kind of methodologies that you are using in order to structure your train of thoughts and your processes and all of the different considerations like security that you're mentioning? Are you using any kind of day-to-day operational standards or best practices that will help you in that journey?
Very much so. So we've started with with the strategy, and our strategy speaks to having all of the pieces in place. So having the technology is one part, having the people, the governance, the center of excellence, the rules. It's a complete solution. So it's not just, we've put down the infrastructure and now we have dashboard reporting, so we're data-driven decision making. That's not how it works. Again, it's what do you want to do? Because you can build amazing dashboards and you can build beautiful dashboards. But what does it tell us? What story do you want to tell? And I think that's important, is everyone has a story to tell, right? What story do you want to tell, and to who do you want to tell the story? So it must be meaningful.
Oh yeah, and I think what you're mentioning is so true, right? Everyone is always so focused around the dashboards, and they think that as soon as the dashboard is there, then that is going to solve all of the problems. But I think the reality is quite a bit different. So to expand upon that a little bit, how about skills and development and knowledge around data? Because from my other conversations, this is always a big theme that is coming back, where knowledge and skills development and educating people around this is a crucial aspect. In most organizations today, we're still seeing this large knowledge gap between what is traditionally referred to as the way the business thinks and the elements that are coming into play in a day-to-day IT operation. How do you deal with this?
So when I started out, I said we're fintech. So it's never IT and business. We're all a fintech, right? So we should all be embracing the technology and the skill. We also subscribe to being a learning organization, which means we have a culture of learning. So everyone has access to online learning and a skills path. As part of this journey, we realized this transformational journey, there are critical skills going to be needed. So certain people, so all our developers have been set out to do Python, because if you're going to deal with the data, you're going to need to understand what to do with it. Then there are certain roles, like an architect role, that would need things like R, right, to be able to understand the big data world. However, it's making the resources, I think, available to people, like I said, the online learning. And as an organization, we've all completely agreed to go on a fundamentals journey. So everybody in the company is doing fundamentals learning. And then AI fundamentals also. So we're all speaking the same basic language and have an understanding. So when we are getting into data-driven decision-making, you understand the basis of where it's coming from. As with anything, we all start in the same landscape. So this is what we've adopted for the next 12 months, for everybody to do this. And then obviously the roles that need it, like the developer roles or the analyst roles, etc., those then have a further, and it's on everyone's personal development plan, and to manage that yourself. So it's also that we can give you the opportunity and the resource, but what are you going to do with it? Are you going to take up the opportunity? And I think learning is an intrinsic part of anything and upskilling. So you can force the upskilling. You can say you need to have X, Y, Z and create the competency for it. We've also, as part of our transformational implementation journey, upskilling is a huge part of the solution. So looking for a partner that has the skills and the scars, that has been through this, that can walk with us on this journey and show us and upskill us at the same time. So that has been a huge part of the solution, to find someone who's done not just the implementation, but also has the knowledge afterwards. So, to help us through this.
Great. So when you say we're doing this organization-wide, does that literally mean everyone? So from marketing towards finance, people who are, let's say, at the front desk, are they all going through this organization-wide program? Everyone. Great. Oh, that's really
everyone is going on it. So like I said, it's the fundamentals, but so everyone has the fundamentals assigned to them.
Well, I'm really impressed. I think that's a great example, and I obviously think that this could be an example for a lot of companies, because it really puts people in a frame of mind to think about how is new technology changing my way. And I always say, not everyone needs to be a data scientist, but getting kind of this basic understanding of what is at play here, what are the risks that we're taking, but also how is new technology and innovation driving the key decisions that we're making on a day-to-day basis. I think that is in almost all cases relevant to any kind of job, no matter whether you are in marketing, finance, or even in IT. So I think that's really some great insight around this. Maybe that's also kind of a nice bridge towards my next main topic that I wanted to discuss with you a little bit more in detail, which has everything to do with the way that we're using machine learning and especially artificial intelligence specifically within your industry, which is that of financial services. So there's been a lot of talk around the possibilities, and you cannot go on the internet these days without seeing all of the wonderful worlds that is being brought to us by machine learning and AI, especially in financial services. Kind of sometimes looks like it's the holy grail, or it's going to solve all of our problems. What do you consider, more from a practical perspective? Where do you see opportunities, especially within your company itself?
So that's quite I agree with you. It's become the holy grail. If you're not doing machine learning and AI, are you even doing anything in the IT industry, right? And everyone wants to sell you something. So it's taking the raw unstructured data and putting it into a structured format. And machine learning being a subset of AI, I think just takes the data and digests it and automates the learning applied to specific tasks. So the process automation. So we're using machine learning to achieve process automation, which then reduces some operational costs and improves its decision making. So we've already started with that within the finance team. And we're using it across some of our security tasks, etc. We're even using it for some of our customer reporting, right? I think within the financial industry, one of the key benefits is around fraud detection. So within the insurance industry, when paying a claim, that is key for us, having those insights and sharing that with our partners, because so much fraud happens on funeral claims, etc., and fraudulent claims, right? And then also robo-advice for personalized wealth management. That's another key thing to be able to use it in the insurance industry. And I think on-demand insurance scores, so understanding consumer behavior. And I think it's all around the personalized customer experience. So I have so much money, I want to invest it. Where should I invest it? So not having a generic solution, but getting my insights into what my behavior and my spending is and my thinking is, and creating those tailor-made solutions.
Wow, so that's really a variety of different use cases, one of which always really grabs my attention and that I personally always find so interesting is fraud detection and fraud management. Because with these classifiers and these machine learning algorithms, you are actually, people are relatively the same. So they have similar behaviors, which is reflected in the data. So with these techniques, I assume you can always start to see which persons are filing fraudulent claims. I think it's a great example that you're mentioning. Do you or does Astute already have solutions in place that show that there's actually better decision making in place with using these kinds of algorithms, or would you say that it's still relatively early stages?
It's relatively early stages, but we have seen a use case where it has been beneficial to the industry. It's also understanding the online transactional patterns, right? And like I say, it's all about the patterns and how you're spending, where you're spending, how much are you spending, and creating. And it's very easy to read the pattern with the machine learning, and pick up these things in the industry.
So yeah, you would always say that people are having relatively similar behaviors on a day-to-day basis. I'd like to expand a little bit further on that question. So with all of these new techniques, and we haven't even covered things like artificial intelligence on a day-to-day basis yet, but do you think financial services as we now know it will greatly change in the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years? And in that regard, what is the impact of data on that journey? And what are you able to do with that data that you cannot do yet today?
So I think with the help of machine learning algorithms and analyzing these large volumes of data, we're going to definitely, like I said, need to cater to the specific interest of the customer. So for instance, if you're buying a house, you're going to need insurance. We're going to offer you a bank account. What are those individual solutions and products that you would need depending on which life stage you're at? Are you a young buyer? Are you at the next stage of your life? Are you a middle, are you a family of moving to the next stages? So I think it's going the extra mile, and even banks of the future is optimized for operational efficiency. You've seen digital banks, self-service banking, but catering to both. So I think it's not going completely digital because there are still people that like to speak to someone on the other side of the phone or like to go to a bank, depending again on your life stage. Are you an early adopter? Are you, so yeah, we want to go completely digital and automate the world, but it's to create operational efficiencies. I think the key is not to make people redundant. It's to create those efficiencies and utilize people better and then equip them for things there's many things machine learning can't do, and there's many things it can do. So you spoke about bias earlier, and there's a lot of bias in that. So I think it's important to know that, the robots are coming, but it's not coming to take away your job. It's coming to create efficiencies.
Well, I fully agree with that statement. There's always so much fear when it comes towards these new technologies that it's taking over the way that the things that people are doing. Whereas on a personal level, what I've seen in most companies is that if you're using and utilizing these technologies in the right way, then it just helps your company grow, which means that you're going to get more jobs than in compared to the situation where you would have put in this technology somewhere else. So, I think also that this landscape will be tremendously changing within the next few years. I'm fully on board with that. So, of course, there's also one other key topic that I need to discuss with you when it comes towards financial services. It's nowadays impossible to talk about financial services and data without mentioning new technologies like blockchain technologies, cryptocurrencies. What is your view on these technologies in the corporate world?
Sure, blockchain. That's a hot topic right now. Blockchain and crypto and making money out of it, right? So the distributed ledger is going to reshape our current infrastructure and processes, I think, within finance. I think from a security perspective, from a transparency perspective, and also from an efficiency of transactions perspective. So you can confirm the transaction and have faster and cheaper settlement. This does bring new things around skills. Do we have these skills to be able to create these? Also from a control and audit perspective, how do you audit transactions around the blockchain and, NFTs and who owns the transaction? And but it is coming, and it's also created a lot of uncertainty, I think, around wrapping your head around what it actually means. But the distributed ledger is definitely a key topic and a strategic objective.
Great. So would that mean that you would start, pilot projects, or are you thinking about how can we start servicing our clients with these technologies? Because what I'm always especially interested in when it comes towards these more blockchain technologies, because I fully agree with you that the distributed ledger is absolutely here to stay. It's great technology that I think we've just seen the top of the iceberg yet. The other point that you're mentioning is that from a regulatory perspective, there's so many questions that are still need to be answered, for which I think even governments at this stage don't have the answer yet. So to get it out of the domain of the individual, so more for the corporate use that we see in larger organizations, how should companies get started? Is it like on a smaller project level, or building some kind of a proof of concept on blockchain technology? What would be your approach that you would recommend?
So again, it's very much around the uncertainty that it's going to create, and then again the skills that's needed for these things. I think proof of concept is the safest way to start. It fell fast, right? And experiment with that before going big bang, because there's a lot of regulations that go around it, especially around banking. Again, it's not just around the data; it's around the security, it's around the legislation. The consent. There's so many aspects of it. So I think to go big bang would be a little bit, I don't want to say ignorant.
Too much belief.
Brave. You need to be brave to go that way, right? So definitely to start within a proof of concept. And because it's a new field, there are some use cases around it, but definitely to experiment with it from a POC perspective. It's not going away. So to embrace it, it's definitely not going away.
No, and then that's something I think is maybe even an understatement. I think we've just seen the top of the iceberg within that regard. So if I would be, let's say I'm a young student, which has been a while ago, and I'm watching or listening to this conversation, and I have strong ambitions to enter the financial services industry, what would be your key recommendations when it comes to in terms of learning and technologies that I should look into?
Wow, that's a good place. That's a good question, actually. I think there's so much online learning available, especially at the start of the pandemic. There was Zoom webinars left and right. Everyone was wanting to learn as we made this, and then to eventually be able to choose the ones that speak to you. So I think within the financial services industry, the key things would be around automation, like you said, blockchain, machine learning, AI, app modernization. So moving into microservices, etc. So I think find something that resonates with you. And it's not just the technology. There's multiple facets of financial. There's regulation, there's compliance, there's security, there's projects, there's agile. There's just so many things that go with it, right? So I think find what fuels you or what speaks to you. Do online learning, read articles, attend webinars. There's so much of free resources available. Just make the time. So do I watch 1 hour of Netflix, or do I watch 10 minutes and do 50 minutes of learning? It's about having that intrinsic motivation to learn. The world will pass by if you stay the same. So it's to remain relevant, okay? And I think reach out to people and mentors within the financial services industry or within the tech industry or anything that speaks to you, whether it's data, again, like I said, InfoSec. There are people like yourself, that create these platforms like this for learning. Also, I think approach someone, ask them, would you be willing to have a half an hour conversation with me once a month or every other week and share your learning and insights? That's the only way to learn and grow, is to keep learning. I don't think there's ever a point where you stop and you say, okay, now I think I know enough. I've got a PhD. The learning never stops, because every day you should be learning something new. Whether you read an article, you watch a video, you do an online course or something, you should know something today that you didn't know yesterday. That is the only way to, I think, to grow and remain relevant. But again, you can't force people, right? So we can create the learning organization and give you the resources, but I can't force you. It must come with an intrinsic motivation to want to show up and want to learn. And for me, I'm quite passionate about that, because I see so many talented people around me, but I wish you could say, just take it all, take all the opportunities and learn, and just, there's no end to it.
Great. So I've been trying to kind of make notes on all your pieces of advice, but it's quite a long list in terms of key recommendations. One of the things that you mentioned that I really like is also search for the human aspects, because there's so many, indeed, there's great online content, there's great learning lessons, but everything is, especially in today's day, it's behind the screen. It is looking at videos, learning by yourself. But one of the key things that really resonated with me is, try to speak to a half an hour to somebody who has been in this field for a long time, build up relationships. And that's maybe the big paradox of the time that we're living in today, is that even though we're all connected, social communication and having an actual conversation is diminishing. And that's also one of the reasons why I'm always so glad to do these kinds of interviews and these kinds of conversations, because we get an opportunity to connect in real life and also get some experience from somebody who is in a completely different industry and is experiencing on different parts of the world, different technologies, different kind of ways of thinking. And I think that's always really a great piece of advice. So that's something that I will definitely, again, take away after our conversation today. So we've been talking a lot around how these newer technologies are influencing the decisions in the financial services industry. And obviously, this show is called Big Data Talks, so that's what we're specifically aiming at. But I also wanted to talk about you with some other key aspects that you're involved in. And I specifically want to talk to you about your dedication to leadership and uplifting women in the technology space. We still, after all of these years, see a majority of men in the technology space. Why do you think that's the case?
Sure. This is a topic I'm very passionate about. I think having started in a male industry, dominated industry, and having been few, and now seeing the trends, how it's changing, right? I think it's got to do with gender stereotypes and gender divide. And then even the aspiration for ICT careers are strongly gendered towards males, right? And there's very few. Maybe now it's maybe different if you speak to someone to say, I want to be a developer, because times have changed. But previously, you wouldn't. There were more women were suited to administrative roles or HR roles or the softer type of roles. So I think we need to address the root of the problem, not just the symptoms.
Good. So maybe if I can ask a bit more of a personal question. So how did you, on a personal level, how did you become interested in technology, and how did you take the steps to become the CIO you are today?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I started on an internship program many years ago at the bank, and we were off. You had to do 4 months of banking and 4 months of programming. Okay, so started right down at the bottom. I even remember my first paycheck. It was not much, but it was such a rewarding program. It was part of the bank's transformational program. So I started as a developer in the support and maintenance team. I did standby for many nights in the world where we still had dial-up. So if you were on standby, you couldn't go far from home. You had to stick around just in case you were called. Had many sleepless nights. So I spent a few years there, and then afterwards you had to either choose a route of going technical specialist or project management, and I chose to go towards the project management route. From there, my career just grew. As the philosopher Seneca says, so luck happens when preparation and opportunity meet, right? And people often say, you're so lucky, but I don't think it has anything to do with luck. You need to have a plan and the goal, and where is it that you want to get to, and how are you going to get there? How are you going to unlock this opportunity? And it was never a straight road. It was never climbing the corporate ladder. It was very much a jungle gym, left, right, down, diagonally. And sometimes it's around the culture or the environment you're in, okay? So as much as you want a job, is the culture and environment right for you as well? Does it speak to your values? And if not, do I take a lateral move? And I think when you start out, you're all about, that growth and the money and how fast can I get to the top. But I think my advice would be to take a step back and just look at what is the plan you want to get to, because do you want to be a specialist? Do you want to be a generalist? So from my project management career, I went into consulting, then got into security, had an opportunity to get into security and set up a cybersecurity academy, which was one of the most rewarding projects I've ever done. And then went into aviation, project management center of excellence. Then I got into this leadership role around projects and operations, and then got into the CIO role. So it's always been a growth for me, but a learning. Every level required something else. I'm also currently busy with my MBA, so I don't sleep much. So yeah, in between the new role and upskilling is a lot of other learning that goes with it, but it's opened so many avenues and networks for me and opportunities. My colleagues are in Dubai or in Thailand, and we meet Friday nights and we get together and we study because it's remote learning. But it's having that commitment again to learning and getting the insights into other people. I've had lots of mentors and coaches along my journey. Again, it's that human connections, learning from other people's experience.
Well, let me first say I think it's a really inspiring story, and I can relate. Especially, I'm also still doing a master's degree in the nights, so I also don't sleep much. But it brings you quite a lot, and I also think that, especially as you're mentioning, you get all of these new insights, new perspectives. I'm also I'm doing mine one in the US, which is literally on the other side of the globe of where I am today. So it's late hours, it's early mornings. But the fact that you kind of challenge yourself always to learn something new, be busy with a new program, or to challenge yourself with an additional deadline besides all the work that you're doing already on a day-to-day basis, I think. As also you mentioned in one of your earlier questions, or in the earlier things that you said, is this lifelong journey of education. I think that's really worth it. And as you mentioned, success doesn't come by itself. It's a matter of hard work and a lot of dedication. One of the things that really triggered my interest that you mentioned is you said, well, I started out with a program in the bank where I did part was on the financial part, but also it was programming. So I assume that's where you learned your first steps into coding. And that kind of brings me towards my next question. So do you think that in the more traditional, I would say, tech education, things like programming languages and algorithms are an obstacle to attract more women into the technology space, or is that too much of a stereotype?
So I think it's a little bit of a stereotype. I also just want to add it was in COBOL programming. I might add.
Oh, wow.
Wait.
Mine was C++.
So mine was before your time. I think it's, again, addressing the root intentionally and creating those spaces for change, right? And to have conscious inclusion, but you need to drive it from the top and not just say, okay, the next person we're going to recruit is a female, or the next person we're going to put into this position is a female. I think the world has changed drastically from where you and I started, that, into the digital world, into the social network world, into the gaming world. I think that barrier has been broken a little bit. However, we still need to get to the root of being consciously inclusive in our strategies or in our talent, and making these opportunities available.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Especially if you think about what you do on a day-to-day basis, so you're a senior leader in a technology position. How do you advocate for female leadership in a predominantly still male environment? Any advice you think works really well?
I run a thing internally called the Women's Circle, which is a women's chapter. It's a leadership program, and it's the 8-step program. So it speaks to finding your purpose, in a corporate, having a sponsor, mentor, coaching, understanding, navigating the corporate challenges in the leadership positions. For instance, if you're a consultant and someone says, make the tea or take the notes, no, how to navigate those difficult conversations just because I'm female. Well, how do you answer and say, I think your handwriting is better. Why don't you take the notes, So it's again breaking those stereotypes, and everyone comes with those stereotypes. So raising the unconscious biasness, awareness, right? Because we've been brought up differently. We come from different cultures. Men and women had traditional roles, and now it's completely changed. So how do you break that unconscious bias in a respectful way and call it out, speaking a different language in a meeting, or referring to, I don't know, if you're one female in an architecture forum, how do you create inclusivity for this person and not make them feel different? Because you are different. You're different when you're in the minority, but embracing that differentness and stepping up. So I think it's having confidence in what you do. My advice to someone starting out is use your voice. Because if you don't use it, someone else will use it, and they will then get the recognition, and you're going to have so much regret after that. I think it's, again, speaking to mentors and coaches, finding them, and it doesn't have to be paid engagements. It's finding those people, and it will change as your journey changes. Those different needs, whether you're going into a leadership position or, speaking to someone who's already walked their journey, or if it's some technical thing you want to learn, engaging with people that's already been down their journey, because they would be more than willing to share that experience. And then I think the other important thing is finding a champion. So a champion is someone you build a relationship with internally at a senior level that will speak your name. Will speak your name in the meeting or when opportunities arise, because they know your work ethic, they understand your values, they understand your journey and what you're on. But also the initiative needs to come from you. There's so many different things. So there's women's circles, there's chapters, there's women in tech, there's girl code, there's multiple things. And you may think there's hundreds, but 101 is going to make a huge difference, right? Creating one more and creating the space for those difficult conversations.
Sure. And what you said around, doing this in a respectful way, I think that is really some crucial elements that still is lacking in a lot of companies. And it's that bias that might be already there, which is difficult to break through. So you mentioned you had some form of an 8-step program that was set up. Is that part of like a company-wide initiative that every one in a technology role at your organization can join? And do you need to motivate people for that? Or do you see that, especially in today's day and age, there is quite a big pool to participate, be active, be heard? So kind of wonder what your experience is in that area.
So I had an opportunity to go through this program and become part of it. And then, so now I've started those circles. The thing I've realized with it is that initially everybody wants to sign up, but then it takes commitment. So it takes a 2-hour commitment once a month. Again, it's that intrinsic thing. Do you want to be a part of the change? You cannot say women are not nominated for senior management roles, or if you haven't come to the circle or you haven't had those difficult conversations. And I think my coach used to always say to me, what legacy will you leave behind? It's created in the ripples that you create. So me having a conversation with someone in the circle and them having a conversation with someone else in their family, etc., that is the ripple change. And raising the consciousness around your power, your value, your voice. So I've done 2 iterations here in my time here. I also run it externally, voluntarily. It's not a paid engagement. It's very much a voluntary circle. And the learning comes from the shared engagement. So how I grew up versus how you grew up, how I tackle a situation around certain things versus how you tackle a situation. And it's all around navigating those corporate journeys, but also finding your power and your voice. Often imposter syndrome sets in, or just, I think, in a world where we're so taken over by the pandemic, it's, losing yourself and your voice and believing in yourself. So easy to get lost in a digital world. Standing up to those things and finding those moments to be able to show up and stand up. It's very much creating I always feel like I'm a little bit of a crusader, for this journey, but I have 2 daughters. What values am I teaching them? What am I teaching them how to navigate their lives and their journeys? What's acceptable and what's not? What do you stand up to and what do you say no to? But having the respect to be able to challenge those conversations and the diversity around it. Diversity is not just color, it's people, it's age, it's multiple things that make up diversity and inclusion. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that, Crusader is in these aspects, I think, a pretty positive note. And by setting example for others, I would say, you're creating also an environment in which you're part of the change. Because if people are reluctant to act upon things that they want to see change, but they don't step up or they don't let their voices be heard, then it does become kind of like an accepted way of doing things. So I actually think that you're quite you should be quite motivating in order to set that example. I also have a young daughter, so I'm hoping that when she gets to the age in which she enters the corporate world, that those things might not be as necessary as unfortunately they still are today. So maybe it's good to ask you one more question regarding this. Is if you were to consider like large companies that are everywhere across the world that have not started or are insufficiently supporting this at a more general level, what can they do in order to be part of this change? How can they join this initiative? And how can they ensure that in the future they will become this workplace that is very focused on attracting tech talent, which is nowadays so much harder to do than it was, let's say, a decade ago?
So I think tech talent, retaining it nowadays has got to do with having purpose, autonomy, and mastery, right? It's no more, we spoke about having the pizza room and the games room and all of those things are no more relevant because we're in a different world now. I think it also starts from the top, very much from the top. Having, as a company, buy into this. So in my company, the Exco team is made up of 4 women out of 6 people. So that's a very strong female leadership presence. So it speaks to the values of and where we're going. I think so. Absolutely, having and if you're given the platform, use the influence and the opportunities you've been given to create a space and send the ladder back down for other people. We all started out somewhere at the bottom. I, for one, did. Again, but creating the opportunity for other people, and again, sending the ladder back down. The program speaks to, it's quite generic. There's many things that run it, like Lean In. There's the Lean In program. There's multiple of these. There's diversity programs. There's so many, and it's taking all of those aspects, I think, and just creating awareness. So if you're aware, and if you make the next person aware, now we're consciously aware of what we need, how we need to behave with each other. How do we behave with each other in a tech forum? What's okay and what's not okay? What are those exclusive circles and the inclusive ones? And that's the culture you create in a company. I think you can't change, people, and you can't tell them what to like and what not to like. However, you can create some inclusivity for everyone together.
So more of, be the change you want others to be as well. Can I summarize
Absolutely.
that? So you don't get started by yourself, then it's going to be very impossible to expect others to follow along as well.
On that note, for instance, the golf circles or the cycling clubs or any one of those, you can't crack those. And a piece of advice given to me was create your own circle of power. So I said, how do I infiltrate those circles? And the advice given to me was start your own circle of power. And I was like, absolutely. Why do I need to get up at 5 a.m. and go cycling and, get onto the golf course? Because that's not who I am. So why do I have to change? Finding those ways again, and being the change.
Right. Yeah, I fully agree with that. So, Zakiyya, one of the reasons that we are having this conversation today, and one of the reasons that we met, is that you recently decided to become an ambassador for the Enterprise Big Data Framework. Why did you decide to join this program?
Yeah, I was so glad when we crossed paths and when I saw this opportunity. So I'm a firm believer in it and the discipline, being in a data company, also an early adopter. So I think it's to increase awareness, to share our learnings and to drive best practices within the industry as it's relatively, as it matures, right? And then to have these kind of engagements also and learnings. Yeah.
Really great. So yeah, first of all, let me say that it's really wonderful to have you as an ambassador, especially with this great voice and your views on everything that we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes. So one of the things, as you know, what we're trying to accomplish with the Enterprise Big Data Framework is really to set standardization to help organizations on how they can use data but in a structured way. So what is your view on frameworks, on best practices, and how do you think it can benefit different organizations which might not be as far as your organization currently is, but who are maybe just more exploring or starting out within this data-driven domain?
So the nice thing about the big data framework is that it's an inclusive approach, okay? The other thing I like about it is that it's vendor independent and technology agnostic. So it doesn't speak to using this specific tool or that specific tool, which is a huge factor when making financial decisions and strategic decisions, okay? Because it can change your technology stack. So that's what I very much like about it. It also gives a very structured approach to starting your data-driven decision-making journey. So we spoke about having the strategy firstly in place, and then it gives you those guidelines. Then having the right architecture in place, okay? So laying down the infrastructure to get your organization to a state where you're able to get the data, warehouses, lakes, etc. Then I think the next part of it is the algorithms. So what are the machine learning use cases that we put into place? Then the processes. I think the processes speak to what is the governance. So is there a data center of excellence? What are the business roles? What is the upskilling that goes with this? And then the function of AI. So for me, it's a all-inclusive, neutral approach to starting your journey and very much structure. And you can tailor-make it. So tailor-make what you need, what you don't need, depending on the size of your organization and the nature. And again, like I said, we all want the dashboard. But how am I going to get to the dashboard, and what story is my dashboard going to tell? And using a structured approach, a neutral one that doesn't say go and use that dashboard or that dashboard. You could use Excel as a dashboard. Okay. But what story do I want to tell? How will I get there? Why? How will I make it happen? So using this approach, and for me, it's very comprehensive.
Yeah, well, I think you're kind of putting it right on the spot, because what we encountered a couple of years ago when we started creating this was there was so much talk around, I want to have this technology, or for me, big data is using this particular cloud platform. And then you get all the whole ecosystem involved that are specifically trying to sell you one specific solution without looking at the broader picture of, why are we doing this in the first place? And what kind of technology do we need, and what kind of algorithms do we need in order to make that happen? So you kind of nailed it right on the spot. So I'm tremendously pleased that you have decided to join the Big Data Ambassador Program. So thank you so much for that.
And I want to add to what you're saying. Sorry, I just want to add to what you're saying previously, with tools would solve our problems. It's not the tool or the technology, it's the why. Why do we need this and why do we need to do this? So very much that.
Absolutely. So I was just kind of leading into the fact that we've already been talking for almost an hour. So if it's okay with you, because I could probably do this for another 2-3 hours easily. So it's not even more of an interview anymore. It's more of a conversation today. So if I can maybe ask you one more question, and that is, you know that every year we are organizing a conference around big data in which we're inviting different voices, both from the technology domain, but also from the business domain, and from across different industries from all parts of the world. So next year, we fortunately have the pleasure to have you as a speaker during the annual conference. So maybe just as a kind of a closure, is any thoughts already on what you're going to talk about when we connect again next year in May for this conversation?
Absolutely privileged to have that honor and I think for me it's around starting the transformation and what does it encompass, where to start, and I think sharing some of the insights that we've gained on our journey and those battle scars, and sharing that there may be some lessons that resonate with someone who has not gone or is starting to think to go down this route. So I'm starting to think that's what I want to structure mine around.
Great. Well, I already look forward to that. So thank you so much, Zakiyya, for participating in the Big Data Talks. It's been an absolute pleasure from my side to have you, and your words of wisdom are truly greatly appreciated. I hope it inspires others to think about data in different ways, or to start learning more about the way in which big data or female empowerment or any of the other pieces of advice that you've been given in this 1 hour conversation are able to change their lives on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much for being part of this episode. And I would really want to, once again, on behalf of everyone, thank you for your participation today.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.